already. She's currently the president of USC's Student Body President, and she has been doing great work along with her other accomplishments. So now I just want to open up the floor between the three of you, especially Sara and Abeer, for you guys to ask Rini any questions you have, get feedback. You know, we're on the cusp of your elections, and good luck to both of you. But yeah, y'all take it away.
Awesome. I'm all down for family conversation. I love it.
Well, actually, Rini, I think that we've had this conversation a lot. I think one of the reasons I connected with you as a person was because you went like very nationally known for, you know, an incident of racial discrimination, if not like racial violence against you. And the moment, and we'd been friends before that, but the moment it happened, I remember talking to you and saying that this is super critical for our community to remind people that we're in the picture, that this, you know, that we're still discriminated against. So do you want to talk about what it was like to be public, elected, a South Asian woman, and experiencing what you experienced back in the fall?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so I think like giving context to that as well, I've been doing a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion work on campus for students with disabilities. We were fighting for a black house for you know, our black students on campus, given the history that we've had, like the May 2013 incident when about, I think, 70 LAPD officers arrested students in a predominantly black party, whereas the predominantly white party across the street was left, you know, to continue. And so we've had different incidents like this at USC's campus while I've been a student here. So I was watching all of these things happen, and I also saw these incidents go dismissed by our university administration. And it was definitely a part of the reason I ran for student body president. I felt like as a woman of color on our campus, it was necessary for me to be an advocate for these communities who are typically ignored and who aren't brought to the forefront of these discussions. For the past decade, individuals from the same fraternity at my university have been elected. Not a single woman has been elected in the past decade, let alone a woman of color. So all of these things, and then my incident happened back in September, and I talked to Abeer immediately the following morning, and we were texting, and it was definitely an emotional moment, and she was there, and she was there for me, and it was a really cool thing to be able to connect on our identity, because I think it was the first time I really confronted my South Asian identity while I was in college. I mean, there was a couple of instances when we were running, when my vice president and I were running, we got some comments like, oh, a vote for Rini's, vote for Al-Qaeda, like petty comments on anonymous social media applications. But then it wasn't until that September incident where I had to confront it. And it was great to have friends like Abeer who understood, you know, our shared South Asian identity, and we were able to, she was really able to help me, like, come up with what I wanted to say just by being there to support me. So I definitely am glad I went public with that story, because it was an opportunity to, like Abeer said, bring light to a community of people who often don't have their stories told. I think tend to be a little bit more invisible when it comes to these narratives of discrimination, because I don't know, it just feels like as an immigrant, because I moved to this country when I was 7, we're often told like, you know, suck it up, grow up, like this is what happens, your grandparents had it worse, that whole, you know. But then you realize like you reach a breaking point, you can't take it anymore. So yeah, that is how I was feeling back when that happened, and I'm glad I was in office, because I wanted to also bring attention to the office that people even cared and were sharing my story, and there were newspapers and there was press who wanted to talk to me. But then I'm questioning, you know, what happens to the student, to the everyday student, the international student. So I think we were able to change that conversation. It was great for USC to be a part of that, as campus activism really, you know, became more fully charged. So yeah.
I mean, and like when, you know, when your story happened, it was following my vice presidential election, and Sara, jump in if you have any thoughts on this, but I had some weird incidents related to my race come out a little bit during my vice presidential election last year. Also being Pakistani, there's this cross between being brown and also being associated with Islam. Being associated with Islam, having an Arabic name, also being brown and South Asian, there's these two kind of weird identities that sometimes connect for people. And very quickly, some interesting parts about me that I think were fairly dormant to people came out, and it was clear where biases were coming out, where if this had been, if the vice president had been a white man, actually, there was a vice president before me who was a white man, and he was never asked these questions or given these statements. And watching you deal with an incident that was so explicitly about your race, like it wasn't just racial, it was about you being Indian, to me was like a moment where it was like, okay, like reminder, like we're not invisible, like Rini is an image of the fact that this crap still happens, and there are people who follow, you posted this and I posted this, Sara, I've seen you post about this, like there are incidents of violence against specifically South Asian folks and Desi folks that happen all the time, and we need to be able to talk about them. And being in public office, you've done such a good job of bringing light to that. In like California, like people know about you all over the country, but especially in the state, and can recognize you as a brown girl who's talking about brown girl issues in addition to advocating for all the minorities. So like shout out to you because you've made clear strides for the community.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And honestly, that's why I think it's so beneficial for us to have like these kinds of conversations. And I'm all about cheering on our fellow women as they run for these positions, but also like when I saw that we've got more Desi women running for these positions, I got so excited because it does matter. Being able to see someone who looks like you and you can identify with that person, it really like transforms your own outlook. And for me, I had to look to role models like Kamala Harris and other people who are maybe in different positions of public office, but it was still inspiring. And I think that now that we're able to create this support system and network among young Desi women who are running for office at the collegiate level, that's awesome. Like I hope that we can continue that. It really says a lot about our girl power. So yeah.
For sure.
I know, at least for me, I've been like fangirling from afar before. I didn't even meet Abeer at Big Ten. I sat like at the table right next to her, and I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, that's her, that's her. I think both of you just say, like, when you say something, it makes sense, and it completely, like, I absorb everything that I get from, like, the other Big Ten schools, other student government leaders across, like, the U.S., and so I think it was really cool to, like, be able to have not only somebody run, but somebody that's also saying things that are very needed, like the conversation is needed right now because things have to change. And I think like when your incident happened, that's when I read that post and I could not believe it. And I was like, wow, like we are allowed to talk about these things when they happen. That was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I really hope, my whole other thing is about making sure like other people also have that space to feel like they can then talk about things, and I hope that when you both are elected, I know you'll do this, that's why you're so qualified for the position, is continuing these issues, bringing them to the forefront, using your platform to create that kind of change and progress we need, because too often I see student governments talking about the same old issues. It's great, like bringing puppies to the quad is awesome, but like there's some other things that we need to also take care of. I mean, it's a balance. You got to have your great programs and things that you can have fun at, but also there are topics like mental health and diversity, equity, and inclusion that are real, and they start at schools where you have a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds figuring out their lives. So I think like coming at this from the angle and the perspectives that we all have, it does make a difference that we're kind of new to the game and we have a fresh perspective on how to approach it. So it's awesome. Yeah.
We have a fresh perspective, and you're right, Rini. Like Sara and I have this. In the Big Ten, we have a lot of like together lobbying efforts. Like we meet twice, well, actually 3 times a year, but twice a year. And we just met at Rutgers, among other places, where we're talking about things that we all have in common, right? And it's like 99% of the time it's affordability, which is super important, and we bring great perspective on it. It's critical. But Sara, if you're elected, and if I'm elected, and Rini in her position right now, we have this opportunity to like have a voice in the room that, I don't know about you, Sara, tell me about the history of your university, because I doubt someone who looks like you and maybe has the parents that you have has been in a position like this before.
Yeah. I honestly can't, like, I don't know of one, especially not in recent history, so it would be interesting to see, like, that shift. We also hadn't had a female student body president in about 5 years, but now that we do, she's the one that's starting, like, very needed conversations. I keep saying that, but, like, we need to talk about these things, right? And so she's the driving force behind that. I think in the past, like, there hadn't been that sense of urgency, and I think when you're not only a woman, but also a woman that's, like, pretty well informed about topics that might not apply to her, I think it's helped a lot, especially when we talk about diversity. So one thing that we've been doing is like bringing in people who know more than us, because as a student government, we can only represent so much, and trying to represent everybody, we don't want to miss any gaps. So for our student government to make that really big switch this year to say, like, listen, we want to hear from you. Here is all of the space that we can give you. Like, we open our doors on, like, usually on Fridays and do, like, roundtables on diversity and inclusion. And I think that's been really cool to watch, but also I don't want to lose that, which is one of the reasons that with me running, like, there's so many reasons that I want to win, and one of them is because I fear that if I'm not there, I'm the current chief of staff, so I get to watch all these things happen and, like, arrange the schedule basically sometimes, right? Which is part of the work. It's been really cool to see all these different voices, and I really don't want to lose that and don't want to lose the momentum.
And you brought up a really good point about like womanness. And Rini, you talk about your election when you can, because being women, and you and Jordan are two women. Myself and my running mate Sam Marlowe are two women. We have president, vice president. I know you have a slightly different system in Indiana, but having two, like, when I was elected last year, and then the previous year, Joelle was the first woman elected in like 3 years. It really does drastically shift the conversations that we're having, and not because we're just coming in and we're feminizing the place up. Like, it's because these conversations that have been missed are suddenly in the room, and I would love to hear you guys' experience with you ladies' experience with that.
Yeah, I think that, well, it was unlike anything USC's ever seen to have two women run. Quite literally, it hadn't happened in history before, and then also it was the first time within the Pac-12 network that two women were running. So for these positions. So coming in at that angle, and we realized all of these things, it was really powerful. But I remember distinctly when we were like working on our marketing and communications, even I was hesitant about like putting it out there and like really pumping up the volume on like how historic it was that we were two women running for these positions, because we got pushback. I mean, there were students, one student was trying to convince a member of our campaign team not to campaign for us because she was telling him that two women could never win at USC. Like, it just couldn't happen. That whole perspective came up. Someone else said, like, they overheard a conversation of people saying, you know, how could it ever happen at USC? So, like, we kept hearing all these stories, and so I was even hesitant to promote it. But then there were the days when I'd be walking on Truesdale, which is like our main street on our campus, and these young girls would come up to me. They were like freshmen or sophomores, and they'd tell me, like, wow, like, this is so awesome. This is so great and so inspiring. I want to do student government. And it really makes a difference for them. And I think that's what I found most powerful in terms of, you know, being two women and running. I think we had all the qualifications, and we were really well informed, like Sara was saying. So I think that just definitely changed the dialogue. But it was definitely the actual image itself, the visualization of like two women of color running for office changed the conversations and dialogue of what women were capable of doing at USC. And I, you know, I didn't want it to stop there, so we started hosting seminars like Elect Her to keep the conversation going, like why haven't women been running for office, encouraging women to run, mentoring them. And it really does make an awesome difference. I was talking to my friend Celia Wright, who ran a dual female ticket at Ohio State, and she was part of my inspiration. And when I decided to choose Jordan as my running mate, I was Googling. I was like, two women running for SGA.
Oh my God, yes.
You know, came across her ticket, and it made a difference for me because the only images and pictures I had seen were of guys in suits, you know, doing their little power walk. But we had fun with it on our campus. We pulled a little, you know, the Olivia Pope jokes and like all that kind of stuff. It really made a difference having some of those role models in TV and media too, to start shifting people's way of thinking. I think all of those things played into, also having a successful election, is because there was this like surge in the feminism we see around us, so that is more acceptable. I'm learning about all this stuff in my gender class, so I don't want to start summarizing it, but yeah, it's really cool. So I do think those are some cool things that happen, and it matters to have representation, absolutely.
All right, definitely. Well, I think we have to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for speaking about your experiences, Sara and Abeer. Good luck in your elections. I know y'all are coming up very soon on April, in the first week of April, correct? Yeah. So good luck to you guys. Wish you the best of luck. And Rini, thank you so much for joining us. You've had an amazing year, and as we were talking about, you've done so many just wonderful things. I think it was great for Sara and Abeer to hear from you, and you all. We can all stay in contact now, and definitely keep in touch. Best of luck to everyone, and thank you guys so much again for being a part of this.
Thank you.